Good evening and welcome to the Newshour Agenda. 3 years into the Russia-Ukraine war, Zelensky is meeting US President Donald Trump at the White House. The world, especially NATO allies and Russia, are watching this meeting very closely and waiting for its final outcome. The focus certainly remains on the crucial minerals deal which the two leaders are expected to sign. The deal is likely to give the United States access to Ukraine's rich reserves of rare minerals. Not much is known about the contours of this agreement and what exactly Ukraine will get in return. There are points of friction as well, with Ukraine pressing for security guarantees, but the United States thus far has seemed non-committal on the same. Here's what we can expect can happen. Now, in terms of the actual signing of the preliminary minerals deal is something that we're looking at as one of the big takeaways. The deal will give US access to Ukraine's wealth of minerals. Also, of course, there could be a joint reconstruction investment fund that's likely to be created as a result of this. The US is also likely to finance the reconstruction of war-damaged Ukraine. Remember that Ukraine has also been expected to get possible financial aid in the future as well. The deal appears to offer no explicit security guarantees, at least at the moment, with Trump having ruled that out. But Zelensky may push to include these security guarantees and has been, in fact, been the subject of much discussion, even as far as President Macron and Prime Minister Starmer are concerned. So what really are we looking at in terms of this paving the way for sustained peace in Ukraine? Because just hours before the meeting, US President Donald Trump has come out to say that if the peace deal to end the Russia-Ukraine war doesn't happen soon, it might not happen at all. And interestingly, he's also made a U-turn on his dictator jibe. He has backtracked on the dictator's statement that he made a few days ago, saying that he can't believe that he actually said that. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has also met with Trump and said that UK is ready to put boots on the ground in support of peace in Ukraine.
President, do you still think that Mr. Zelensky is a dictator?
Did I say that? I can't believe I said that. Next question. To begin the process of ending this spiral of death, I had historic back-to-back calls with President Putin, very successful calls, I might add, and President Zelensky, and my team also spoke with the Secretary General of NATO on numerous occasions, and we're working very hard to get that war brought to an end. We'll let you know what happens. It'll either be fairly soon or it won't be at all.
I'm working closely with other European leaders on this, and I'm clear that the UK is ready to put boots on the ground and planes in the air to support a deal.
All right, we have Jessica Stone joining us from outside the White House. She's a Voice of America correspondent. Thank you so much, Jessica. Always good to have you on the show. But today, even as these two world leaders are meeting, all eyes are on what the possible outcomes are. And it appears that President Trump has softened a bit, at least, on the dictator jibe that he made a few days ago. Could this have something to do with the two earlier bilateral meetings he's had this week with President Macron and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer just yesterday?
Well, it's clearly all part of the negotiation, right? I mean, he was asked in the press conference with Starmer yesterday whether or not he would apologize to Zelensky for calling him a dictator. And he didn't even answer that question. But what he did say is, I respect him. We're going to get along great. They have fought very bravely. He really spent a lot of time outlining sort of the relationship between his respect for the Ukrainian people and the way they've fought so bravely in the war. Now, these two men have met 3 times in person before. They've had numerous phone calls. And really, if you want to think about what the likely outcome is here, they, as Zelensky said coming into this, they have a framework for a deal. And both of these leaders seem to expect that they'll hammer a lot out today, but that they will also continue to hammer out what this deal looks like going forward. We're not exactly sure what the text is going to look like, but we'll be able to report on that as soon as it's released. And remember, the bottom line is this is creating an economic relationship between these two countries. That's the way that the U.S. wants to offer a security guarantee. It won't necessarily be boots on the ground, but there will be if to develop these mines over the next 18 years, which is the average time in which it takes to develop them, it's going to mean a lot of U.S. personnel or U.S. contractors on the ground.
And the one who did offer boots on ground was the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, but there was a lighter moment where Trump actually said that will you be able to take on Russia? And then we saw the laughs all around. Is that some kind of a muscle flexing on part of the United States? Is that just a joke? Or is he somewhere trying to bargain to try and make Europe realize that, you know, if they're completely on their own, then they would be in a much tougher spot? Is this some kind of a bargaining chip that Trump is using? Because many see President Trump as somebody who's quite unpredictable.
Well, look, the Europeans understand that without a U.S. backstop, they're not going to be as effective as they would like to be against Russian aggression. And that's why they're asking for a U.S. backstop. And President Trump has offered one. He said that, quote, I don't think anybody's going to play around if we are there with a lot of workers. Look, I think it's all part of the negotiation. This is the way this president operates. And the goal is really to get the EU to step up its part of the defense cooperation and not overly rely on the United States.
All right. Thank you so much, Jessica, for joining us with those quick updates there. Thank you so much for joining us on the show indeed. Let's open this up and take it across to our guest now.
You're watching the News Hour at 10, debate number 1, on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
With us at the moment is Oleg Ustenko, ex-economic advisor to President Zelensky, Alexander Bratarsky, senior Russian analyst. But I want to go first and foremost to Raymond Vickery, who's a senior associate of the Center for Strategic and International Studies and former Assistant Secretary of Commerce. Thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen. Let me begin with you, Mr. Vickery. The big question that many are asking is that this sort of little bit of a climb down we saw Trump do in terms of not calling President Zelensky a dictator. What does this really portend in terms of what we can expect today? There's a lot of talk about this rare earths deal. Will that in itself be enough for the US and for Ukraine to forge ahead?
Well, thanks very much for having me. That in itself will not be enough, but it is a good start if it happens. As Assistant Secretary of Commerce, of course, I always advocated that the economic aspect of international relations dovetailed into the security aspects. And so it is a certainty that if you have people on the ground who are from the United States and the West who are doing minerals development, it is a step toward providing stability. Of course, there are many a slip twixt cup and lip, and the details here are not known. But the overall prospect of being able to get Ukraine and the U.S. Working together to develop the minerals of Ukraine is a good one. And I would emphasize that bringing peace in Ukraine is important not just to the West, the United States, Ukraine, but is important to India. The peace of the world is now indivisible. We've got to be able to head off a World War III. That would have implications across the Eurasian continent with China and India, as well as Europe, United States, and Russia. Right. So this is absolutely important, absolutely crucial. It is a step forward, but by no means certain that it can actually come to fruition and do it. As the president.
Let me bring in others as well, sir. Let me bring in Oleg Ustenko. Oleg Ustenko, many are seeing this as some kind of a softening as far as Donald Trump's position is concerned. How much of this has to do with the two earlier bilateral meetings with UK and France? And at the end of the day, if one has to do business, one cannot take, extreme positions. That's very clear when it comes to diplomacy. But how much of this really do you see in terms of hope for a roadmap for peace as far as Europe is concerned?
Right. So basically, there is no doubt that you have to start with something. And I think that this deal might be a real starting point with this new administration in Washington, D.C. So from this point of view, it's quite positive. Also true that there were many, if I may say, that I call that misunderstandings or kind of strange messages we heard from the White House over the last several weeks, let's say. However, at the same time, we do believe that these two visits, prior to the visit of President Zelensky to Washington, I mean, the visit of Emmanuel Macron and also the Prime Minister Starmer yesterday, both were extremely useful in order, again, to pave the way for the meeting of Zelensky and Trump. So from this point of view, I think that these developments were quite positive. What do we expect now? Yes, it's true. We are going to sign a deal today, and as a Secretary of Treasury yesterday pointed out, that the preliminary work is already done. So basically, we are expecting that both leaders are going to sign the document. However, do not overvalue this document, because here we are talking more about kind of framework agreement. Exactly, framework agreement. So basically, our understanding that after this framework agreement, extra agreements should be also signed, and it's not immediately, and it's exactly about those.
And those are the pictures coming in from the White House as well. In fact, President Zelensky being welcomed by President Trump, and in fact, they're inside the White House. In a short while from now, we perhaps look at the briefing as well. But Alexander Bratisky, Russia has a very important role to play, no doubt. Given the fact that President Trump has already indicated, as far as Ukraine not entering NATO is concerned, there's also the larger question of the Ukraine territories that Russia is in occupation of. How much of that land would Russia be in a position to give up? It certainly would not want to, is the position that it has taken. But somewhere, if you're looking at a negotiation, there has to be some amount of give and take. What could be a possible outcome where Russia and Ukraine both have some amount of face saving?
Well, it's possible, but a lot will depend, of course, with the meeting with President Zelensky and President Trump, because you have to take all those minerals, which is very important for Ukraine at this point. But you should also look for this meeting as very political. Mr. Trump, who actually was angry at Mr. Zelensky, called him dictator, whatever, but he's meeting him personally and actually giving him a respect in the White House. And of course, there will be a political deal maybe reached between them, because actually this minor minerals, yes, it's an important thing, but yes, the Ukraine wants security guarantees and so on. So they will probably work on that as well, and that's very important. So Russia and Russian political leaders, of course, will look at this meeting, and the outcome of this meeting will also provide certain Russian opportunities, because you see, the political will of Russia is sort of like, we don't give anything and so on, all the lands and so on. But in the same time, yes, when there will be negotiations there, possibly, I assume, there might be some concessions from both sides, because everybody wants to.
What will those concessions be? Certainly is going to be something very important. But Raymond Vickery, there's also another point of view that's been expressed by Europe, and which is that if United States says very clearly that when it comes to Europe, when it comes to NATO itself, the European Union will have to sort of look after itself, militarily, when it comes to its own defense capabilities. But there are also those who say that this perhaps could embolden Russia and other countries, perhaps even China, because really the cost of actually expanding their countries, of expansionism, will not in any way be felt by these countries. How do you look at that point of view?
Well, I think it's a very important and salient point that you raise, and it is on the security side. Unfortunately, in tandem with this positive development in terms of mineral development, there is a really 19th century view on the part of President Trump, in that we should not have gotten involved, the United States shouldn't have gotten involved in World War I or World War II, and we shouldn't have participated after World War II in bringing about a system based on the rule of law, the United Nations. illusions. It's sort of back to the future that Donald Trump sees that Europe can go it alone, and the United States has a separate security interest. I think that this is completely contrary to history. And is a very dangerous kind of development.
Right.
So you never know what Donald Trump says that he means and what he's saying for effect. That's part of the problem, but it is for certain that the point you raised about security for Europe and Europe going it alone is a development that has to be faced and has to be solved.
All right. Oleg Ustenko, we've seen what President Zelensky has said. It's not just Donald Trump who's made these sharp comments. He has come out to talk about the US-Russia talks, calling them a notorious meeting. He slammed Trump, saying, with all due respect to President Donald Trump as a leader, he's living in this disinformation space. So there is a lot of lack of trust on both sides. Big question is, again, how can that difference be resolved on ground?
So I don't think that it's really the issue now. Look what happened yesterday. You already pointed it out. Before, President Trump was calling President Zelensky as a dictator, and then yesterday he was surprised that he ever said that before. Of course, when you are a leader of a nation which is currently in the state of war, and who in fact has a support of 50% plus, least. So it's kind of ridiculous when somebody from the outside is calling him a dictator who has a 4% approval rate. So I don't think that we have to pay attention to these minor details now. What is really important, I would be absolutely agree with the colleague before. So what is extremely important is that not even these particular deal. What is extremely important is that what kind of specific guarantees Ukraine can get from the West, not even from the United States under these circumstances, but from the West, and first of all from the European Union and from the UK as well. This is the first issue, and the second issue: what will happen with our territory? Because yesterday, when Trump received this question, he was also saying
the question of territory just a short while earlier. But let me bring in Alexander Bratisky. Alexander Bratisky, while Ukraine is of course seeking security guarantees, United States not very keen on them. But is there a possibility that EU might actually provide that, and will that actually act as a deterrent? Is a question on many people's minds, because who knows what's going to happen in the future? Is a question that Ukraine is asking, particularly given the aggression from Russian side 3 years ago.
Well, yes, the Europeans actually are just telling that they are willing to, as the Brits have said, that they're willing to put their troops and so on. But actually, it's very difficult. I'm not justifying any position. I'm not speaking for the government, but it's not possible the Russian side would agree with this. However, there are also other solutions. Let's say that the troops might be provided by, let's say, UN, from countries which are more neutral, like Brazil or Saudi Arabia or India or even Turkey, which is a NATO member. All those countries are friendly toward US, toward Ukraine, but they also have good relationship with Russia. Because you see, when you have soldiers guarding peace, if they're UN soldiers, if somebody shoots them from both sides, Russia or Ukraine, they're still going to provoke a war. And they're still US peacekeepers. They still support it. They still have a mission. We know that some of the UN peacekeepers have failed, but at the same time in Israel and in Israel and Syria, they supported peace for many, many years. So there are also possible solutions of the troops from some neutral countries, let's say under UN, for example.
All right. Alexander Bratisky, Oleg Ustenko, Raymond Vickery, I'd like to thank all of you gentlemen for joining us and analyzing this for our viewers. All eyes will be for the final outcome of that meeting, because it doesn't just have implications for India or the United States or Russia or Ukraine, but perhaps the entire world. Let's take a quick look now at those visuals when President Zelensky arrived at the White House and was greeted on the White House porch by President Trump. Let's listen into those visuals.
President Trump, you got nothing. President Trump, you got nothing.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I had pretty close. How are you? Pretty shut.
He's all dressed dressed up today?
President Trump, what's your message to Vladimir Putin, sir? President Trump, you got nothing. President Trump, you got nothing.
All right, President Trump taking a jibe there at the casual attire of President Zelensky. Thanks so much, in fact, all our panelists for joining us.